Hello, this is Randy with Excel for Freelancers, and welcome to the Account Reconciliation Manager. In this week's training, I'm going to show you how you can create your very own Account Reconciliation Manager absolutely from scratch, and that's going to include everything from up until any type of account, any type of transaction. You're going to be able to select all or select some of them and reconcile your own accounts. It's going to be an incredible training. I cannot wait, so let's get started. All right, thanks so much for joining me. I got an incredible training this week, the Account Reconciliation Manager. Whether you have a bank account or credit card charge accounts or any type of account, I am going to show you how you can quickly and easily not only design software around how to reconcile those, but how to create those for any type of account quickly and easily and automatically. As something gets in balance, it is going to show just like that. So also you're going to be able to add interest, you're going to add charges and service charges, and that's going to be whether it's for a type of credit card or type of bank or any other type of account. We're going to be able to show you how to do that, how to reconcile books. Very, very important when you are trying to keep proper accounting books. Reconciliation is the way to do it, and today I'm going to show you how to do it. We're also going to show you how to navigate past, and we're going to do it all from scratch. So we're going to be designing this from scratch. I'm going to show you how to add new ones, and also we're going to show you how to automatically save existing ones and load those existing ones. Simply with a search, we'll be able to load in previous reconciliations just like this. And we're going to do it all from scratch. This is a sample workbook. I do bring these trainings to you each and every Tuesday absolutely free. I love your support. There's so many great ways you can support this channel if you like this content. One, simply like and share. That's a great way to do that. Sharing these videos, liking them, comment below. That really helps. Another way is to join our Patreon account. We've got a brand new Patreon account with tons of incredible benefits, such as downloadable PDF codebooks, automatically updated trainings and workbooks. So for example, there'll be some features that I leave out or that I add on later based on your suggestions. Those updated trainings, those updated workbooks are all available on Patreon. That includes any type of feature that you may want to see. I'll include that. Any type of fix that you might need or we might need on a workbook, or any type you want me to focus on a particular part of workbook. I do all that with the feature, focus, and fix inside our Patreon. So I hope we'll get started on that. That just starts at just $3 a month, and it's a fantastic way to support us. Once we get to 500 members, we're going to be a free course for just those members. I'm going to be sharing that entire course, brand new course, only for our Patreon members. So that's our goal, 500 members. Okay, great. Let's get started on this. Don't forget to subscribe and click that notification icon bell. That'll alert you when we got these trainings. All right, this is a sample. So basically what I'm going to be doing in this is I'm going to be creating it from scratch. So based on this sample, we're going to have the ability to have an account, the ending balance, statement date, search ID, beginning balance. And then if there's any cash back or something, now keep in mind that if the account type is like a credit card, it would be cash back or credits and interest paid, where if the account type is a checking account, it would be interest earned and services. But I want to design all this from scratch. So what we're going to do is we're going to close out this. This is a sample. We don't need to save our work, and I'm going to start right here. Now this is the blank workbook. This is the page that we're going to be designing it all from scratch. Every step is going to be with you. Every step, line of code, every formula, every feature. I do have some data and some foundational things that I want to go through with you, but let's get to designing this one first, because that's what I want to do. Because I want to show you, not only give you these great applications, but show you how you can create them yourself. So what we're going to do is we're going to keep those first two columns for admin, and what you'll want to do is you'll want to hide those columns. So we're going to color those gray, and that's a really great way to start because you've got two columns dedicated for admin. And then what I'll do is I'll save this top row probably all the way till about, say, Q. This is going to be our heading row, so I'm going to format that cell. I'm going to give it a fill. This is a great one, training for if you're just getting into VBA or you have a little bit. This one I'm going to walk you step by step. So sometimes we do these things. If there's a simpler application like this, we can do them from scratch. Other times what we'll do is we will generally create them, and then sometimes I'll go over the code step by step with you. It really depends on the size of the application, the type of the training we go through. So I got something for everybody in these trainings. Okay, so what I'm doing right now is I'm just giving it a fade effect, the top and the second line over here, and then I'm just going to give it a general color, and that's generally what I do throughout, just kind of keep an eye on it. And we'll go probably down. I'm going to go down a lot of rows because we got a lot of data possibly. So we'll go down to about Q, let's say 300. It's fine for now. I'm just going to give it our baseline color. This is going to be our baseline, this turquoise color. If you want to get this exact color scheme, let's take a look inside. We're using this one. We are using Solstice. So this one's called Solstice. If you have that, that's the one we're using. You can use anything you want. Okay, so let's give it a heading right now. We're going to call this, let's call it account, just as you saw inside the sample. Account Reconciliation. Hopefully I'll spell it right for a change. Manager. Okay, obviously we're going to need a bigger title than that. Reconciliation. I probably spelled it wrong. All right, so let's take a look. I'm going to give it a font of 30, and then what I want to do is also I want to give it a specific font, something that's common. I use this Arial rounded a lot, and then we'll go in the middle. Okay, so that looks pretty good. That's going to cover it. I try to keep these consistently, and I'll give it some icons in a little bit later. Okay, what we want to do is we want to start out some fields, and we're going to have a few fields here. Starting in 2, what I want to do is I want to, let's just start on the fields here. That's a little bit easier, more clear. So I'm going to merge and send to this one because I want column D is going to be for the selection, as you saw, and column E is going to be for the transaction data and a few other things. But what I want to do is I want to have that account drop-down list here. So what I'm going to do in row 3, actually, let's give it a little bit more space. Row 3, what I'll do is I'll merge and center that. So I'm going to merge and center that, and then let's do the right justify. And we're going to call this the select account. So we want a drop-down list of accounts, select accounts. And I've got an admin with a few accounts listed. So we're going to select a specific account. And then we'll have a field here. That'll be for the account. Then I want to have an ending balance, as you saw on the sample. And then lastly, what I want to have is a statement date. We want to know the date of that statement. That's really important because that date of that statement is going to determine what transactions load. We may not want transactions after that statement date, but we do want transactions before that statement date. Okay, and here what I want is I want to know what reconcile number. If we're loading a previously saved reconcile, I want to know what ID that is, reconcile, right? So let's do reconcile ID, and then I want that ID to appear. Probably, let's put it here under, actually, let's put it here. I'm going to copy, paste it. I'll put it in J. That's going to give it, why is that? Because I'm going to use this column as the ID because it's a smaller column. So this is where I want the ID. So we'll put something like 1 or whatever here. So that's where I want it, and I'll left justify. So that's the currently selected, or if it's a new ID, we'll do that. Okay, so we have the statement date here. And then also I want to skip one row, have one row for spacer. In row 5, what I want to do is I want to put, basically it's going to be based on an account type. So let's just put in a temporary something called cash. We're going to change that cash back, okay? It'll change in a moment because it's going to be dynamic. And dynamic based on the account type. Remember, bank accounts and credit card accounts are handled very differently. So we want different text based on that. And I'll put another one, just put fees in here. I'm going to put something temporary. It's going to be a formula. And then I'll just right justify those here. And then we're going to have the, let's right justify. And then here what I want to have is I want to have the charge, in this case, the charge amount. What is that amount? Charge amount. And then here I'm going to have the date. So we're just going to put the date of whatever that charge is. So that means if you've got cash back or card or something on your account, you know, when you get your bank account, there's a certain amount of fees or maybe you earned interest. I'm going to put all those transactions there. And then again, I want an amount here and then the date here. So I like the way that that looks. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to hold down the control and let's merge and center these. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy, I'm going to paste special, and then I'll paste the formats there. All right, and then I'm going to merge and center these just like we did above. And then I'm going to right justify just like we did. Okay, so I've got that one. I like that. And then I'm just going to hold down the control. And then I'm going to format these. I'm going to give it a border here. We're going to use the same consistent color here. So that border is going to be this darker turquoise here. Then I'm going to surround it with this thin line. And on the right side, we're going to put that dotted line. And then likewise, I'm going to do something a little bit different here. These are the fields that are going to be the input fields. So in here, I want something. I want to call these white. So we'll give it that white color. The border on these is going to format those cells. And then the border is going to be that same color, but on the top right and bottom. Okay, so I've got our fields. Now these are all going to be dates, so I can format those as a short date. That'll be sufficient. And then I'm going to right justify these fields, holding down the control, right justify those. So we've got our reconcile ID, our form start. So what we'll do is we're going to skip a row, and then we're going to put in row 9, we're going to put our main header. We're going to call this account transactions because we want all of our transactions to list here based on whatever account we've selected here. going to merge and center that all the way across here. And then we're going to have our subheading here, so our individual columns. In this case, we're going to have a selection here in column D, or select all, just as you saw in the sample. We're going to have a transaction date here. I want the description here. And this one, we're going to do a merge and center because I want the description to be long. So I'm going to merge and center the description all the way over here like that. And then next up, what I want is the check or reference number. And I've got some sample data we'll go over in a moment, reference number. And then next up, I want the debit amount, and we want the credit amount. That'll increase or decrease based on the account type. Credit amount, if it's a credit card, that credit amount will increase. If it's a checking or bank account, that debit card is going to be the one to increase. So let's go ahead and give it some formats. I'm going to right click and format those cells. We're going to give it a fill. We're going to use the same fill effects that we did on the upper to keep the theme consistent. So I'm going to go with this medium dark to medium light here. And then I'm going to paste that down, okay? Then I'm going to click format those cells, and then this one I'll do a border and also just fill effects. The fill effects are going to be the secondary color, which is the lighter fill effects right here. And then we're going to click OK. And now I'll just give it a border all the way around. That'll be sufficient all the way around. We can actually give it the color. If you want, you can give it a black, or we can use the same border color. So if we use the border color here, the same border color that we're using all the way around in the inside as well. Okay, so saving our work. So we do so far, we've got our dates. So now what I want to do is I want to skip and I want to put some summaries in here. Here, what I want to be able to do is I want to be able to search for an ID. Search, as you saw, there's a search ID. So we can search for previously created reconciliations. And also here, I want the beginning balance. I want to know what the beginning balance of that is. Usually on our statements, it comes with a beginning balance, and we can write that in. So the beginning balance there. Also, I want to know the cash back. In fact, what I'm going to do is whatever is in here equals whatever is in here, because this is going to be a formula I want to put here. Cash back, and I also want to know the fees. So the next one's going to be equal to the fees, this text, because this text cashback is going to change, and we'll go over some formulas just in a minute. It's going to change, remember, based on a bank account. Now, what do you mean by account? In the admin, let's take a look. Very, very simple. All we have is simply a list of accounts, and then we have the type here. We can use a drop-down list. I'll put a drop-down list here. Bank or credit card, right? Because they're handled a little bit differently, so we want to make sure that we differentiate between the two. I've also got a named range. If we go into formulas in name manager, I've got a few named range to help us out. We have account name. Now that account name is going to be a dynamic named range using the offset formula, and it's going to be based on those names. And I also have an account type. Again, another dynamic named range, but this one's going to be on the type. And that's going to help us determine the selected type when we select a specific account. So it is this name manager, this account name here, that we're going to be using in the drop-down list here. So if I want to select that account type, I want to know the name of that account. So we go into data validation here, and we create a listing. And what type we're going to use? F3. We're going to select it from our list, and it's going to be the account name. So we're going to click OK. So now we can select between whether it's the check-in or all the accounts associated. We're going to need that. That's very important. So what else do we have? I want to insert a select all or checkbox here. We can do that using the insert. I'm going to insert a symbol. Now let's take a look at this. Whether it's an unchecked or checkbox, VBA is going to handle that. But if we take a look at there into the Wingdings font, this is character 168. We're going to alternate between this unselected box, and we're going to alternate between the selected box, which is character 254. So between 254, which is selected, 168, which is unselected, we're going to be alternating with that. We'll start with that, and we're going to close that. Okay, so we want to do the same thing here, but we want to make sure that the font is the same throughout. So what I'm going to center that, and then I'm going to go all the way down, let's just say to a lot of transactions, we'll go all the way down to, let's go with D1000 there. Go all the way down there. That's about as far as I want to go. And then I want to make sure that that font is the Wingdings font, because it's only that column that is going to take on that checkbox. I'm going to hold down the shift and then select the Wingdings. I'm going to enter that, so now that they're all Wingdings, and that's what I want there. Okay, so now that we've got the transaction data, I'm going to center these here, making sure they're centered. I'm going to bold them, and then this one as well should be bolded as their header. Okay, so as we enter, we're going to put some conditional formatting here that's going to help us saving our work. So continuing on, so here we have the search ID, we have the beginning balance, we have the cashback. These two are going to be user filled, so I'm going to color those white because the user is going to actually fill them. These two are not. So for all of these, and so else we want fees. Then what do we want? I want to put that ending balance. What is that ending balance? Because this is going to be our summary right here. Then once we have the ending balance, I also want to put the cleared balance. What is that cleared balance? That's going to be a formula that determines what is our cleared balance based on the selected transactions, which one we're selecting. After that, I want to know the difference. What is the difference between the ending balance and the cleared balance? Very important when we're reconciling statements. So what is that difference? And we're going to put that difference in right here. Okay, so I'm going to justify these, and we're going to also format those cells all the way around here, and then we'll give it just a border. We'll use that same color that we've been using, that dark green, and all the outline and all the inside, but the inside here, what I'm going to do is give it that dotted line. Okay, I like that. This one I want a little bit different. I'm going to make sure that this is format cells. I'm going to give this one a little bit thicker border on the top and on the bottom, and then probably the left and the right, just so we can differentiate. That's very important. And I'm going to make sure that it is bold. So good. Okay, we're good to that. We'll add some conditional formatting onto there. So cashback, this is simply going to be whatever is located here, the amount. The fees are going to be whatever is located here equals the amount here. And then also what I want to know is the ending balance. Now the ending balance is going to be equal to whatever we enter here. That's the ending balance that the user is going to enter. Beginning balance, and then the cleared balance, that's going to be a formula. We'll go over that in a moment. And then the difference basically is the difference between the ending balance and the cleared balance. So that's just a formula. So but I do want to do is round that off. So we'll go over this formula soon, and then we're going to enter the search ID. So that's pretty much it for that. Now all we need to do is add some button sets and some conditional formatting, and we're going to be good to go. Okay, but here, let's see, we got to add some more information here. So what do we want to add as far as the admin area and the columns there? In that area, I want to know if the reconcile is being loaded or not. So it's going to be a true or false Boolean. So we're going to put that there. I want to know if it's being loaded. I also want to know what the account type is. I want to know, is it a bank account type? We can use a formula for that. So how are we going to know that? Well, that, of course, is based on whatever's been selected. So we're going to start with if error, and then we're going to index. Now, remember, we have a named range based on that account type. So that's exactly what I want. What is that account type? That's what we're indexing. We're going to base it on a match. And we're going to match what row is it. We're going to match to see when this F here is, we're going to match, we're looking up basically F3, and we're looking up in the array of the account names. Let's type up here so we can see it up here. Account names, right? We're going to look for that, and we want an exact match. Okay, we want the column is going to be 1 because we're just, the account type's a single column. And there we go, that's the index. But what if there's an error? If there's an error, I just want to show blank. Okay, so that way we have bank account if it's showing. And if we select Visa, that we have a credit card. Okay, so now we've differentiated between, which is exactly what I want. And the next one in 4, I want to know what row we've selected, right? If I have the recon row, we have a database here. We have 2 databases, and we're going to go over those now. The first database is called the transactions. Now, this is all of our transactions. We've got a transaction date. We have a transaction account. We have a description. We have a check or reference number. We have the debit amount, credit amount. It's either or, but it's not both. We have whether it's been cleared or not, right? Whether it's been cleared. We have the recurring ID. What ID is associated with that? Remember, when the reconcile, if we save it, it's going to be 1, 2, or 3. As we save this, that way we can go back to a previous reconcile and make changes or just look at it. Okay, so we want to save. We want to know what reconcile that was, and we also want to know what row. What is the row of the reconcile? Is it row 11, row 12, row 13? Because when it comes back, I want it to come back in the exact same row that we saved it. So that's going to be very important. So we want to know what row. I also want to know what row of the database. That is this current row. This is row 6, 7, 8. So we're going to use that, and we're going to use the formula to do that. So we've got our database, and we also have our reconcile database, right? We'll reconcile 1. We have an account, right? We have a beginning balance if there's any, an ending balance, and a statement date. And all that's going to get saved. So when I save that ending balance and that statement date, it is going to get saved directly inside this database here. And so what we want to do is we want to keep track of the reconcile IDs. Now I've created a named range for that under the formulas, the name manager, and the account reconcile ID or REC ID. And again, I've used an offset formula here. If we zoom in on this, reconcile, starting in A2, we're starting in that header row, but we're moving 1 row down, not skipping any columns. We're going to count based on all of the rows starting in the header row, but we're also subtracting 1 because we don't want to include the header row. We do want to include the header row because it prevents errors and when there's no data. So that's important. Okay, so we understand that we have that recurring ID. So if we know that and we want to know what row, if I want to know what row 1 is, or I want to know what row on 2 is, how are we going to get that? Well, it is that formula that we're going to place right in here. So in for, I want the reconcile row. And what is that row? So I'm going to look right here inside K2. And I'm going to determine that using a formula. So this is going to be equals, if there's an error, I'm going to match. And what are we matching? We're looking up this value. And what is the array that we're looking up? We're going to look up that array that we were just talking about, which is the reconcile ID. And I want an exact match, okay? But I want the row, I don't want to just found it. So I don't want just to find it. So I want to add 2 onto that because that's going to get us our row because our first one starts in 3. If there's an error, I'm going to show blank, okay? So that way, number 1 is on row 3. Number 2 is on row 4. So that's working just fine. Okay, so what we're going to do is I'm going to left justify these. And I'm going to right justify these here. And then what we do is we're going to give a color probably all the way up to, let's say, we'll give these ones up until 5 a certain color because there's some things that I'm going to put in. No, I don't want that black font. And then we'll give it this color. Let's just say this orange color here. And then what I want to do is I want to have some information here. So let's go ahead and all the way down here. Add some rows. So what do I want in here? I want to know the next ID. What is the next reconcile ID? Next recon ID. We can use an equals if there's an error. I want to use the max formula. I'm going to max the reconcile ID. But I don't want the maximum, I want the max plus 1. That's going to tell us what our next ID is. If there's an error, why would there be an error? Well, there'd be an error if there was no date at all. So if there's an error, I just want to set it to 1. That's going to be our first. But there's no error, and our next one's going to be 4. Okay, so what do I want in here? I want to make sure that when we load up, I want to make sure that they have the account, they have a statement date. I want to make sure that we have everything we need in here when we load it, just in case we do. So at least I want to make sure that we have a select account and a statement date here. I want to know how many fields are filled out here. So in case we want to change the required fields, it's very easy. That's one way to do it, required fields. And we can use the count A equals count A. And so basically I just want to count, holding down the control here and here. It's going to return 1, right? As we fill those in, 456. These are amounts, so I'm going to hold down the control here, and these are all amounts, so I'm going to assign those amounts. Same thing right here. These are all amounts here, and I'm going to do the same thing here, okay? So now we have amounts. Okay, so I want to know how many fields, and this is the date, so if we put in 815, we see the date. All right, and I like to left justify these here, saving our work. So now what I want to do is I want to make this dynamic, this text dynamic based on the account type. Well, let's continue with these. I want to add a few more. I want to know the required fields for the service charge, right? If there's a service charge being added here, I want to make sure that the user has filled in this and this and this. And I don't want them to leave any blank. So what I want to do is I want to count the number of fields that have text. And I want to make sure that it's 3 before we actually save it. So we're just going to call this service charge fields. And again, we're going to do the same thing, equals count A, or counting all the text, and basically holding down the control here and just selecting these 3 fields. Okay, we're just going to make sure that now it's 0, which is fine, but as soon as we add some text, it's going to go to 1. Okay, I'm going to do the same thing here, but this one, we're going to call this interest fields, and I want to know interest because it's going to be either interest paid or interest costed. So equals count A, I'm going to count those fields, just a quick way of making sure that the user has filled in the required fields. As in the VBA, we could say if F7 is blank, if H7 is blank, if J7 is blank, right, then do this. But it's much easier to say, is this 3, right? As soon as this is 3, right, we put an amount here and put in a date here. As soon as this is 3, we know that it is automatically have the required fields. So that's a quick way to tell. Saving our work. So that's it. That's all the fields. So I'm going to put one more in here. I want to know whether we're going to hide the transactions based on a certain date. So that's going to be a checkbox. So I'm going to insert. In this case, I want to insert a form control. I'm going to put a form control right here. And I'm going to put some text right here. And I want to know, as you may have seen in the sample, I want to know hide transactions after the statement end date. Hide, this is going to be an option, transactions after the statement end date. And I'll make this bigger. So that's what we want to do. So I want to know whether we should hide the transactions based on after this date, right? So maybe we don't want to see any transactions after the statement date. We have an option to do that. And I'm going to put this, format that control, and I'm going to put the cell link here based on B9 and click OK. All right, so we have that there. Let's give that a little bit of a color, the same thing, and we're going to call this hide transactions. Okay, and then put a question mark there. Okay, so as soon as this gets checked, it goes to true. That's what I want. Very good. All right, so we've got the basic part of it. We're going to put in some buttons. We're going to put in some conditional formatting. Now, what I want to do is I want to put in some conditional formatting based on some information here, just a few different rules, and I want to add some dates. Let's format those dates. Again, let's go down to E1000. And then format all those dates accordingly. I'm going to format all of these just holding down the shift and give it that short date. So they're all the same. I like that. That's going to be just fine. So now we have that, and I guess we could center that. Let's just go all the way down here and center that all the way down. Okay. Generally, I'd never go down this far, but you don't go down because it does take up space, but this is a small application. Generally, you only want to go down to the limit. Great, so we've got a description and we've got a check amount. We've got everything we need. We're adding some conditional formatting. So what I'm going to do is just going to highlight some cells here. Go down to conditional formatting. We're going to do a new rule. Okay, I want to base a formula, and I want basically a few different formulas. First one I want to do is I want to basically color the odd and even rows based on a condition. So it's going to be based on two conditions, actually. So it's going to be equals and what are the two conditions? The first condition is I want to make sure that E and any row starting at 11, so we want to get rid of the absolute dollar sign, does not equal empty. That's going to be the first. And what is the second condition? I want it going to be based on odd rows. So odd rows is going to be 1, the mod of 1. We can get rid of that equals. Okay, so that's two conditions. So for odd rows, what do I want to cover them? I want to give it basically this background color, but a little bit lighter. So I'm going to format those. I'm going to fill it. Here's that background color, but I'm going to go into more colors, and I'm just going to make it a little bit lighter. Clicking OK. Clicking OK. Okay, that's one rule. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy that, and I'm going to click OK. And then what I'm going to do is go back into conditional formatting, manage the rules actually. And what we want to do is we want to base that on a lot of rows, not just up to 16. So we'll go 9999. Okay, click apply. So that's going to apply it to everyone. Now we're going to get a new rule. I'm going to formulas, and I'm going to paste that same rule in there, except I'm going to change it to even rows now. In this tab, I'm going to format, and then I'm going to go into, again, selecting that color, and then more colors. I'm going to give it a very light color, nearly to white. Okay. And then click OK, and then OK again. And we'll just double check the range, and we're going to make sure that this is also the same range, and then give it just a large range is fine, sufficient. Clicking apply. Okay, and that's exactly what I want. I'm going to do one more. So I'm going to do a new rule, again, using a formula, and what we're going to do is we're going to base it, in this case, on just a single condition. So equals, in this case, E11, getting rid of that absolute before 11, so it's every row does not equal empty. And basically what I want to do is I want to give it some dotted lines in the middle. So I'm going to give it a border, and I'm going to choose this turquoise color here, and I'll go a little bit darker here, maybe this one, and then I'm going to use a dotted line here, and clicking OK. But I don't want to apply this to the outside borders. I only want to apply this to the inside. So what is that range going to be? It's going to be starting on E11, and I want it to go only to I, not all the way to the end. So I, and then the last row. Okay, so it's going to be based on that. So then 9999 is enough, and then apply. Okay, so that's exactly what I want. So as we add information here, you see we got that nice conditional formatting, we got that dotted row. So that's exactly what I want to give that. So the conditional formatting is done. We're good with that. Let's give it a little bit of a button set, and then we can start adding in some VBA. So I'm going to insert here, and basically some shapes, just some basic shape button sets. And I'm going to move over to the right here, and we're going to add them in right here. And basically, I just need 3 buttons, save, new, and delete. That's going to be sufficient. So here, we're going to give it the style, basically the style of our forms here. I'm going to call this save. Yeah, we can go capitals. I think we'll go capitals on this as opposed to the sample. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to format this one just the way I like it. So we're going into the size and properties. I'm going to go into the text box here. And then we'll do 0.03 on the left, but the right's the most important because I'm going to right justify that. I don't need anything for the top, and I don't need anything for the bottom. That's sufficient enough. And so then what I want to do is we're going to go in here and then right justify it in the middle. And that's just the way I like it there. Okay, so we're good on that. All right, once we have our save button the way we like it, what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate that twice, and I want to create ones for new and for delete. So I'm going to put that down here. So we're going to call this new, and we're going to call this delete. That's going to be be able to delete those in case we don't want to. Not necessarily the transactions, but the reconcile. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to line those up here, and then I'm going to space them vertically. So we're going to distribute them vertically. And now what I want to do is I want to create some navigation buttons. So insert, shapes, and I'm going to insert this triangle here. And I'm just going to put it right about here. Okay, I'm going to make it a little bit bigger because we want to be able to see it. and we'll do the height on 0.4. So I like that, but I do want to give it the same look and feel as we have. So again, going to give it that same button here. And now what I want to do is, now the way I've got it the way I like it, I'm going to duplicate that and I'm going to reverse it. So I want this one here to rotate it and this one horizontally. So this is going to be our previous. Okay, so we've got that there. I like that there. We'll bring them up a little bit bigger, 0.4, a little bit big. So I'm good with that. Now I'll just want to do is I want to make sure that we're right justifying those here. And I'm going to left justify this one here to make sure that everything's lined up. I like that. And then we'll just bring these as well all the way on the left. Everything's going to be lined up on the left. Not this one. This one. Everything's going to be lined up on the left. That looks good. Everything's good, lined up. And now what I want to do is we'll just make these a little bit bigger so we have room for the icons, and I'm going to add icons. Generally, you want to add your buttons first, then your icons to make sure that the icons end up going on top, right? So the things you add after go on top. So I'm going to hold down the control, line this up, and group that. That's going to be our navigation. We have a save, new, and delete. Perfect. So let's go ahead and add some icons. I'm going to insert some pictures here, and I've got some icons saved up. So basically, I'm going to hold down the control and insert those. I'm going to change the height on that to 0.25. That's going to give us a little bit smaller. That's what we need. If we take a look at them, I've got one that's going to be used for the icon. This is our icon that we're going to put in right here. So we want that there. I'm going to merge and center this here. And then we have space for the icon. So I'm going to bring our icon here. I'm going to bring it down here like this. And I'm going to give it a color that's closer to the theme, which is about like, let's say this one here. Okay, yeah, that's closer to the theme. So we've got our icon, and I'm going to color this font, same here, like that. Okay, so now let's go ahead and put in our save. We got this for our new, we got our save for our checkbox, and we have our delete. Okay, I'm going to use my selection. I'm going to line up those icons to make sure they're all lined up horizontally like this. And now we're ready to group and save. So I'm going to undo that. So now what I want to do is I want to group these. So I'm going to hold down them, lining them up, grouping them up. And again, lining them up, grouping them here. And we're good to go. And the last one is for delete. So everything's looking good. And now all I want to do is use my selection tool and make sure that we're not sizing these in measures. So I'm going to right click, format the properties, go into the properties here and click move but don't size. We don't want that changing after we, okay, we're going to save our work, use our unselection tool. Okay, good. So we've got things looking really good. We've got our navigation, we've got our conditional formatting, we've got everything just the way I like it. And now we're ready to add some VBA into this. But before I do that, I want to make sure that our formulas for our names are important, right? Because this particular name, right, this is going to be either interest earned or cashback or credit. It's going to be based on whatever our transaction type is, or account type, I should say, is. So it's going to be based on that. So equals if this here, account type equals bank, then we want to show something else. So what do I want to show? If that's the case, I want to show interest earned. Interest earned. Otherwise, I want to show cashback or credit. So it would be a credit card. So in that case, cash back, in this case, or credits. Credits, something you get some credits on a credit card, or cash back, you might want to list them here. So it's going to be interest earned if it's a bank, or cash back or credits, you know, the kind of thing that brings down your balance inside a credit card or brings up your balance if it's a credit card. Okay, so that's what I want to show. Okay, and what I want to do is I also want to do something similar for this, but basically it's going to be the opposite. So this would be bank fees, right, if it's a credit card, or perhaps fees or interest paid, right? So let's put that inside here. So equals if account type equals bank. In that case, what do I want to show? In fact, I want to show a service charge, something that's going to deduct from your account. Service charge, service. Banks have service charges, service charge, and so that would deduct from your balance, right? Or if it's a credit card, what would increase that balance? Well, that would be interest paid, fees, or perhaps interest paid. That's going to increase that credit card, that liability. Interest paid. Okay, so don't hold me if I spell these things wrong. Okay, all right, so we've got a service charge. So now, as we select a different type of account, here is what's going on, right? If it's a Visa, it's cash back or credit, and fees or interest paid. If it is a banking account, it's going to be interest earned or service charge. These are going to change accordingly as well because they're connected to that. Okay, good. I like that first. I just wanted to get to that. We're pretty much done with the screen implementation there. So that's it. It's relatively simple on the screen. So now all we need to do is add some VBA. And the first thing what I want to do is I want to load all of the transactions that have not been cleared, meaning this checkbox is on there, for that specific account up until this date if this is selected. So basically what we want to do is we have some data here. We need to run an advanced filter based on a few conditions. Of course, it's going to be based on this account name. So we need to run that advanced filter, and we need to have criteria to do that. So the first thing what we want to do is for criteria is we want to know if it is not cleared, right? Cleared meaning P. How do we know that this, if we insert symbol right here, and with that not cleared, what is that insert? And then close that. Well, it looks like a checkbox, right? But what if that's for the Wingdings font? But what if it's just a regular font? If it's just a regular font, we see that it is this Calibri here. This is this. But what about if it is not cleared? If it's checked, I want to know also if it's checked. So in this case, let's go ahead and insert a symbol so we can see what that would be like. This symbol here for this checkbox here, and click insert, okay? And then close that. So now it's been inserted again. When we change this here, and we change this back to a regular font, any font, we see it's that P, right? If we use Arial, it's a little bit more clear. Calibri here. Calibri, we see it's that looking like P or whatever it is called here. So what I want to do is when it's cleared, it basically is going to be not this. So not, so I'm going to use a formula. It does not equal this checkbox here. I want to know any transaction that is not cleared. This is cleared here, this checkbox. And then if we scroll down here, we see one that's not cleared. This is not cleared. So I'm looking for any transaction that is not cleared with this account and possibly based on this date. So let's take a look. What is this date? This date, if reconcile B9 equals true, what does that mean? All right, let's take a look. Remember, we have this brand new thing. Remember, this is based on B9. So when we uncheck it, B9 is going to be false. When we check it, B9 is going to be true. So if this is unchecked, we're not going to be hiding any transactions. This date will not play into it. We want to show all the transactions. We don't want to hide the transactions after this. But if this is checked, that means we only want to show transactions on or before this statement date. So we need to create a filter based on that only if this is true. So we can do that with a formula. This is the formula. If in reconcile B9 equals true, then I want it less than or equal whatever's in J3. J3 of a reconcile, of course, is our statement date. Otherwise, just put does not equal empty. That's it. That's all we need to do. Therefore, if we unselect this checkbox and we go into the transaction, this simply will change to does not equal. When we'll need this particular transaction, when I search for it and I want to know all of the transactions that have been reconciled for this reconcile, then we're going to use that as a criteria, but not right now, right? So our first one, we're simply loading new ones. I want to load a new one. So we're not going to use this, but when we load the existing one, we will need this criteria. What we want is we want those results to come from here. We want all those results. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take these results, I'm going to bring them directly in here. Okay. All right. So that's just what we're going to do. So let's write a macro that can do that. Let's load it based on this account, based on this date here. Okay. And we're going to do that right now inside. And of course, based on the cleared status, right? If it's cleared already, we don't need to load that in. So let's go ahead and write a macro now. So we're going to go into the VBA inside the developers and Visual Basic. Alt F11 will get you there. And I've got just some empty macros here. We've got a single module here called Reconcile macros. So what I want to do is the first thing what I want to do is I want to clear some data so that when we have a new reconcile, it's going to clear all the data. So we can do that here. So I've also dimensioned some variables already. We have the reconcile ID as long. The reconcile database row, that is the database row that we're going to be focused on right here inside, 3, 4, 5. I want to know what row that is on, so we're going to have to put that into a variable. I want to know the reconcile row. If it is on a specific row, we need to know that. That is the row that we're going to be focused on here. What row is it on? 11, 12, or 13. We're going to need to focus there. So we need that. I also want to know the last reconcile. What's the last row here? What's the last row of the value? I want to know that. And also I want to know the transaction database row. That's going to be focused on our transactions. What database row? What is the last one? If we loop through them, I want to know the transaction database row if we're focused on a specific transaction. I want to know the last row of the transaction database. When we run that advanced filter, we need to know the last row. Once we get the results of that, I want to know the last results row, right? We need to track through those results. We need to know the last row of those results. And we also need to know, as we run a loop through those results, starting at 3 going, we need to keep track of what row we're on. That would be the result row. So we want to keep track of the result row here as long. Great, it's relatively simple. We want to know the account name as a string, and I want to know the statement date as a date. That's it for that. So that's all we need to do. So the first thing what I want to do is just simply clear out all the information on the new. So we're going to do with reconcile. Now reconcile is the sheet name, the code name of that. To make sure, just hit the dot there, the period, and make sure that IntelliSense pops up. We know we've got the right sheet name. So the first thing what I want to do is dot range, and I want to do K2. K2 is that ID. I want to make sure that it is whatever's in B5. So basically, when we create a brand new reconcile, I want to take whatever that next available reconcile ID, and I want to place it directly inside K2. So that's what we're going to do with this line of code. K2 value is simply equal to dot range whatever's in B5. So B5 dot value. And that's going to be the next reconcile ID. All right, so next up what I want to do is I also want to just simply clear out some information. I want to clear out everything else. So how are we going to do that? Dot range. In this case, we're going to clear out. So I want to use dot clear contents, and then we're going to enter some dot clear contents. So I've got them saved here. I'm going to copy them because it's going to be a lot. So basically, save a little bit of time. I'm just going to clear a bunch of fields out. All these fields that we want to clear out, right? It's a brand new one, so we're going to clear everything out. So I'm just going to paste them in here, and that's going to be F3, H3, J3, all the way, including our full table, D3 through K99. Now, keep in mind that I did include K here. K is going to keep track of the row that it's on, right? I want to know that transaction row. What row is it on? 9, 12, 13, right? If I know that row, I've got that row here, so I'm going to bring that row also in there. And it's going to be hidden, of course, but we're going to put it directly in K. Great, so we've cleared that out, so we understand that we're going to clear out those contents. And what I want to do is I just want to make it easier on the user, and I want to select a specific cell. So F3, that's the account name, we're just going to select that. So dot select. And that's pretty much it for that macro. So that's going to do it. So all we need to do that. So this particular macro, we're going to assign to that new button. So I'm going to copy that, and I'm going to go in here, and I'm going to scroll over here. We can move this up because we're done primarily. And then I'm just going to right click and assign the macro to this. So it's going to be this one, or we can paste it in. Either way. So when we click new, it's going to do just that. Clear everything out, which is exactly the way I wanted it. And now we have the ability to select an account. And I also can put in any balance, and I can put in a statement date. So if I put in a statement date, now what I want to do is once I put these two in, I want all the transactions to load for this specific account that have not been cleared up until this date, and only if this is selected. But if this is not selected, it's going to be regardless of this date. This date won't have any time. So in this case, if it's unselected, it's going to load all the transactions for this account that are not cleared. That's it. That's all we're going to do. And we're going to do that with a macro. And that macro is called load new, right? We're loading a brand new reconcile, has not been saved yet. So we're going to load that in. So how do we do that? Well, with that one, it's going to be relatively easy. Focusing on with this sheet, again, reconcile. And we want to do a few things. I want to make sure that they have at least entered 2 things, right? Remember, it's very important. We need that account. I need to know what account to load. And I possibly need to know what is. So I want to make sure that they've got at least F3 and J3 value. So we can check that here. So if dot range F3 dot value equals empty, or dot range J3 dot value equals empty, then we need to let the user know to please fill in those fields. Then, right, let's type in the then, message box, please make sure to add in an account. And we also want to make sure that we have a statement date before loading transactions. Exit sub. Nothing we can do until they do that. So assuming that they have, we want to make sure that everything's cleared, but we've got that covered. So that is it with the reconcile for the most part until we bring it back in. We're going to then shift our focus to our transactions database. So with transaction database. We're going to focus, first thing what I want to know is I want to know the last row. If we're going to be running an advanced filter, we're going to be using our criteria all the way from L to N, but I need to get the last row. In this case, the last row is 1008, but I want to make sure that we're going to bring that in, okay? So to do that, we need to get the last transaction row. Remember, we already got that right here, the last transaction row. It is this variable that I'm going to use. So with the transaction, it's going to be equal to, basically it's going to be basically on the last transaction A. This is the last transaction row. If for some reason the last transaction row is less than 3, then exit the sub, because there's nothing we can do, right? We have to make sure that there's actually data in there, nothing to do. Okay, but now we're ready to run our advanced filter. So how are we going to do that? So we've got auto hotkey to help me automate that. And so the first thing what we want to do is determine what our headers are. Where's our headers located? Well, they're located directly in A2 and all the way through J in the row. But in this case, keep this in mind. I've got a result here that's blank. Why do I have a result that's blank? That's very important because take a look at this. Remember, we have a merged cell. In fact, I'm going to be merging all of these here. But we have a merged cell, and that's very important. We have a merged cell to make sure that we use a blank cell. We've got a blank result here too. We've got the description here and a blank one. So to do that, we want to make sure that our results here have a blank. And the only way to do that, if our results have blank row, that means our original data must also have a blank row. But it doesn't. So how do we do that? Well, if we say that our original data goes all the way until column K, then that includes a blank data. So we can do that, a blank header. So we can do that if we run our advanced filter all the way from A through K, and of course it's not the last row, it's the last transaction row. And then we're going to use the filter. Where is that filter come? If that criteria is going to be starting in L2, and it's going to go all the way to N3. So N3, that's where our advanced filter is coming up. Okay, and then what do we want? Those results, I want those results to come directly inside here from Q through Y. So that's just what we're going to have inside. So Q2 through Y. So that's going to get us through, but what about our results? Well, we determine the last row of the results. We're going to use column R to do that. Make sure that we have that. So let's do that. So the last results row is going to be equal to, let's do here, last results row is basically equal to R is the transaction date because that's required, very important. So we're going to use R. That's going to get us our last result row. Last result row. We need to make sure that we have results. So the next line of code, which I automated, if the last result row is less than 3, then exit the sub. Check last result row. So now that we check the last result row, we know we've got data and results. We can then bring that data inside our reconcile statement. Okay, good. So now that we have that, so let's go ahead and bring it there. So we want to make sure that we do that. So now we need to call out that sheet again here, reconcile. Now everything's already lined up. So we need reconcile dot range D, and where's our first row? Where's it going to come in? It's coming in D, right? Coming in D, and then all the way to K. This is where we're going to put that result row and put it in directly in K. It's going to be hidden, but I want that database row right here. So from D all the way through K, we're starting in row 11. Here we're starting in row 3, so we need to compensate for that difference. D11 through K and the last result row plus 8, right? 8 plus 3 is equal to 11. So dot value is going to be equal based on our results. So dot range, our results are starting in Q3 through Y in the last results row and last result row. Okay, so that's going to bring over transactions. All right, actually, we only need to bring through X here. I only need to know the row, current row. I don't need to know the recurring row yet, right? That's going to be saved. That's not necessary, only through this. So the credit amount, debit amount, and the row. Just here, debit amount, credit amount, and row. So that's pretty much it. That's all we need there. So now that we have that, we're good to go. So what I want to do is I want to simply add a specific character here. I want to make sure that they're the unselected, right? This character, I want to make sure this becomes unselected, D10. And what is that D10? Well, if we look in here, insert, and our symbol, we're looking at this one right here. It's basically character 168. So that's the one we're going to enter, but we're going to do it through VBA. And I want to put directly inside D10. Okay, so let's escape out of there, and we're going to do that. So reconcile, $range, D10, dot value is equal to character 168. That's going to be the selection change. So when we click on that, it's going to select all or unselect, and that's it. So end with, and then end with. Okay, so saving our work. And now when do we want this to run? Well, I basically want this to run when we make changes. When we make changes here or here, but I want to make sure that when we run that they both have various values in them. That's what we're going to do. So basically when we make a change, that's when we want to do it. So that's going to come from worksheet change event. So inside the direct sheet here, based on that worksheet change event. So we're going to bring it over here. So reconcile, this is the one, and we're going to base it on a sheet. So it's worksheet. Here it's change event. So this is the change event. So the first thing what I want to do is on the worksheet change, if the user makes changes to more than one cell, I want to get out of that. So if target.count large is greater than 1, then exit sub. This prevents lots of bugs. Okay, so we're going to make a change. So if not intersection, what two cells are we focused on? We're focused on F3 and we're focused on J3 and J3. So if the user makes a change to either one of those, and we also want to make sure that they both contain values. And I also want to make sure a few things. I want to make sure that they contain values, and I want to make sure that we're actually not loading. I want to make sure that B2 is false. When I load an existing transaction, if I search here and I load it, we're going to be making changes here, right? So that type of change, this is going to go to true. Different kind of change. When the user makes a change here because they want to load information here, those are different kind of change. So we want to make sure that B2 is false. So we need to check those three things. So it's and range. We want to make sure that F3 dot value does not equal empty. And we want to do the same thing for J3. So I'm going to simply copy this and then change the range to J3. And J3 does not equal empty. We want to make sure that both of those are, and we also want to make sure, and range, we want to make sure that B2 is false, right? If it's true, don't do anything. Equals false. Then and only then do we want to actually load it. So once all those conditions, then we're going to reconcile it. I'm going to paste that in. So then we're going to run that macro reconcile and then underscore load. That is the macro that we're going to run when those things change. So saving our work so far, that should be sufficient. So when I change this to check an account, and let's just change it, reconcile load. Let's just check on this. Reconcile load new. Okay, whoops, forgot the new there. All right, so that's sufficient enough, pasting that in, and then running this there. Okay, and we'll last result row, spelled that wrong. Okay, last result row, and making sure that we got that variable correct. Continuing on here, and that looks good. Okay, that's exactly what I want. Let's make sure we format these with currency. So we'll just go down here and make sure that those are currency formatted, which is what I want. And take a look at here, the description. These should be merge and center, but when we merge and center, these is kind of going to mess up our conditional formatting. I'm not going to do all of them. Basically, what I'm going to do is merge and center them, go them to the left. And keeping that in mind, it does mess up. So now I'm going to just basically copy this format. Actually, let's left justify it first. Right, because we should make sure that it looks nice. Okay, so now what I'm going to do, copy this. I'm going to paste the formats all the way down here. And keep that in mind that it will possibly mess up your conditional formatting just a little bit. And then you may have to create it. So what do I mean by that? If I go back into the conditional formatting, it's very easy to fix. Manage rules, let's take a look at that. Notice, look at the range got kind of messed up. So now it's kind of like convoluted. It still looks okay, but it's still kind of messed up. So all we need to do here is to make sure that our ranges are correct. So we're starting on E11. So clear that out. And we're simply going all the way in this case to all the way through I in this case. So we just want to make sure that we have that in this case I. So let's clear that out, E11 all the way to I. Taking a look at that and then clearing all that out, E, and then just change it until notice it got changed. That does happen when we do that. So theoretically what you want to do is make sure that you paste that in. Okay, apply that. Okay, that looks good. Now let's do the other one. And then all we need to do is just copy and paste these, and we'll update that. Got that cleaned up with just those 3 rules. Okay, so I like that. Everything's looking really good. Now what we can do is we can change the font on here and make this a little bit smaller. These are the row numbers that are associated. Remember, 813, 814, 815. These are the rows that are associated with our transaction here, right? So if we come down here, we see that the row 813, so we bring everything in based on that information. Okay, and we have just a single, we want to make sure that we have just a single type of this only for checking account. If we were to change that to a different one, we'll make sure that notice that it loads a different type of transaction based on the Chase Visa credit card. Good, everything's looking good. Again, let's go ahead and reduce this and color these. I'm going to take this all the way down here and just give it a little bit of a lighter color and probably reduce the size. So I'm going to go into home. Let's do it 10, and we're going to eventually just hide these right here. So let's go ahead and just make them a little bit lighter. Okay, I like that because then we can reduce the column. Eventually, what you want to do is when you don't want to see this, you just change the font color to the same as the background, because those really should be hidden. For our purposes today, I'll make sure that they're visible. Very good, I like that. So let's continue on now. So what we want to do now that we've got it loaded, now what I want to do is I want to be able to click here and select all or select none. So how are we going to do that? Well, that's going to be with the selection change event. So if we go into there, remember we've got characters. So I want to be able to select one or more and then have them all select and change that character to the checked box. So that's of course in the selection change event. So we're going to go back into our Reconcile. We're going to focus on the selection change because that's the change that we want to make. So again, we're going to start out again with the same thing that we did before. If we select more than one cell, we're going to exit out. So now if the user makes a change to any selection, I want to select that specific cell and I want to change it to the checked, or I want to change it to the unchecked based on whatever the current value is. So to do that, we just need to check. So first of all, if not intersection, we're going to check all the way from D11 through D, and then we'll just go through a high number, nothing, right? And also there, and I want to make sure that E contains a value, right? If there's no value here, right, nothing here, there's nothing to do. I want to make sure that E contains a value before I do anything, okay? So we can do that here. So and range E and the target dot row dot value does not equal empty. Then we want to do something. What do we want to do? Well, then what I want to do is determine what to add. Are we adding a checked or are we adding an unchecked box? It's going to be based on the current value. So if the target dot value is going to be equal to character 168, then what I want to do is simply add the 254. Then target dot value equals to character 254. Else, what else? In this case, else, I want to say target dot value equals character 168. That's it. And then all I want to do is select something else. So we're going to do range F3 dot select, and that allows the user to create multi-select. So now when we select something, select it again, so it goes back to the checked and unchecked very, very easily here. Okay, I like that. That looks really good. But now what I want to do is I want to be able to select all using D10. So if the user makes a selection on D10, I want to select all or select none based on whatever the value is in D10. So we can do that with another selection change event. So this is going to be based directly on D10 only in this case. So D10. So once we make a change to D10, a selection change, then what do we want to happen? Well, in that case, then I want to dimension, I want to know the last row. We want to select last row as long, okay? So what is that last row? That last row is going to be equal to, in this case, we'll use column E. We want to use that date. So E is going to determine the last row. E there, we want to know the last row of the value, right? Because I want to select them all, right? And we're using E just in case there's nothing in D. So that's going to get us the last row. So once we have the last row, if the last row is less than 3, then, excuse me, not less than 11, right? Check in there, less than 11, that's okay for now. Go back in here, less than 11, then exit the sub in case there's no data. So less than 11, then exit sub. Okay, assuming that we have data, then we can continue on. In that case, what I want to do is I want to determine, are we going to be selecting them or are we going to be unselecting them? And of course, it's going to be based on the current value. So if the target dot value is equal to character 168, then I want to basically, or else, right? We're going to do something else. We're going to select them or unselect them. So else, do something else. So in this case, what I want to do is just basically change the opposite. So this case is range, including the current one, D10 through D, and the last row dot value is going to equal character, again, 254. 254. Okay, else we're just going to basically change it to the opposite. So this one simply is the selected one. So we can do selected. And then otherwise it's the unselected. So here, going to copy this, going to paste that directly in here. And all we need to do is just change this here to 168, 168. Okay, and this is going to be the unselected, right? So unselected or unchecked. We'll go unchecked. And then that's good. Okay, so now that we have it, we'll call this checked, not selected, checked. So checked and unchecked. That's a little more clarity. So we've got that saving our work always before running VBA. Now we're going to check it here. Uncheck it. Okay, the only other thing is notice we want to, again, select F3. So let's do that so we can click. So lastly, regardless, so range, going down here, we're still within the original if range F3 dot select. So what that does is it selects something else. It allows you to click a single cell multiply very easily, like click, 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 click. Okay, so now we have the select all, unselect very easily. Good. So now what we want to do is do a little bit of math to make sure that we have everything correctly. So what I want to do is I want to determine what is the cleared balance, and it's going to be based on what is selected here. So how do we know that? Well, the important thing to know is if it is a bank, it's going to have generally a debit balance. I mean, you can have a debit balance. If it is a credit card or credit, it's a liability account, it's going to have a credit balance. So basically, if it is a bank, it's going to be all the selected debits minus all of the selected credits. Whereas if it is a credit card type, it is going to be all the selected credit amounts minus the debit amounts, which is generally payments, right? So credits are charges and debits are payments. Whereas in a bank account, debits are deposits and credits are payments or checks or withdrawals. So that we understand that, what we want to do is we want to get that credit balance. And we're going to basically use the sum if. We're going to wrap that around an equals. If error, and the first thing I want to do is determine, I want to add in whatever is in the beginning balance. So the first thing I want to do is just whatever's in M3, the beginning balance, we're going to start out with it. So it's going to be M3 plus, and then we're going to determine if, I want to know if it's a bank account. So if, in this case, B3 is equal to bank, then what do we want to do? Well, then we're going to use the sum if based on all the debits minus the credits. Sum if. In this case, what are we going to sum? I'm going to sum one based on the range. So what is that range? We're going to use D11. We'll use D11 all the way through, let's say D9999. We'll use 4 nines. That'll cover it. Okay, so but what is it going to be based? It's going to be based on character, this time character, CHR, and character 254. I only want to know based on those selected. I'm only selected. And what is the sum range? Well, we're going to use the sum range. We'll use debit amounts, but we didn't create that yet, or I did actually. Debit amounts, I forgot to go over that one with you. It's just a named range. It's a dynamic named range based on all the debits. I'll show you that in just a moment, based on this column here in column I. So debit amounts. So it's going to be all the debit amounts, right? Here's the sum if minus what? Minus all the credit amounts. So all we need to do, copy and paste this here, paste it here. Instead of debit amounts, we're going to go with credit amounts. So credit amounts, again, I'll show you, it's a dynamic named range, basically all these columns in column J. So that's all it is. Okay, great. So that is it if it is a bank, right? So that's all we have to do. Plus, what do? We also, I want to add one more thing. Plus, I want to know if it's a bank, all of the cash back, all of the credits. If it's a bank, I want to know whatever's in M4 minus M5, right? So M4 minus M5, okay? So basically, we want to know, and remember, in a bank, it's going to be all the interest that they paid you minus all any fees that you paid from the bank. So we want to add in any interest that the bank paid you. We want to subtract out any fees that you paid. So that's it for the bank, right? So we're good with the bank. So what if it's a credit? Here, if it's false, then it's a credit. So again, we're going to do something very, very similar. But in this case, all we're going to be doing is taking all of the credits here. So what we can do, I can just copy all of this. Actually, let's just copy the first part of it. The credits minus the debit. So in this case, sum if, copy that, credits minus the debit. So in this, the total debits, just the opposite here. So we're going to copy all the debits. Okay, and then also what we want to do in this case is we want to add in. I want to know all of the fees or interest paid, right? So how much, what did we pay? That's going to increase our level. Plus M5 minus whatever, let's say cash back, minus M4, whatever cash back they've given us. Okay, so that's all we have there. Then what if there's an error? If there's an error, I just want to show blank. Let me just fix this, D11, that's not going to work. Okay, we've got to fix that range there. It should be D11 through D99. Made that mistake, didn't see it. Okay, good, just fixing that up there. Then we're good to go on our ranges. We're ready to go. Okay, I like that there. Everything looking really good. Just into that, and we have our balance here. So what do I want to know? I want to know the difference. What is the difference between the ending balance? If I've got an ending balance of, let's say, $13,000, right? Then I need to know the difference. So what is the difference there? It's going to be simply equals M8 minus your balance, right? So that's it. That's our difference, right? Okay, very good. Okay, so I like that everything's adding up to, and now let's go ahead and put in some information. We want to be able to save this now. I want to be able to save this just as we did before. So let's assume we have a cash back or credit, right, on this particular account. And maybe we have we'll call it cash back, right? Sometimes we get points or cash back of $20, and let's just say as of 8/20. And also we paid some interest, so interest paid, and maybe we paid about $60 of interest, and we have a date of 8/30 on this, 8/30. Okay, so we've paid that, so we want to make sure that that adds in. Now, assuming that we have a correct ending balance, let's say we do have a correct ending balance, we want to save it. Our cleared balance might be 12,757.19. Okay, so that would be clear. So what I would like to do is I'd like to have some conditional formatting here, and I would like to know if it's off. So if it's different, if this is not 0, I want to have some conditional formatting. So we can do that. Conditional formatting, I'm going to manage the rules. I'm going to create a new rule, and it's going to be based on a formula. So we can use the formula. It's going to be simply this is equal to 0. So when it's 0, what I want to do is I want to format it in green. So I'm going to give it a font bold, which is already is, I guess, and then give it this green so we know that it's 0. And click OK, and then apply. Okay, but what if it's not? What if its value is different? I want to create a new rule, again, a formula, and then in this case, M is not equal. We could just use one rule, right? In this case, but it's fine. 2 rules is fine. One rule meaning you just color it green and then you color it red when it's not out of balance. So that would be just fine. Does not equal 0. And then we give it a format in this case of also, and then we want to do red. So when it's not real, I want it red. And click OK. And click OK. So now when we unselect one, we see that it automatically goes. But as soon as we select everything, it goes to green. We know that we've got it in balance. Okay, I really like that. What I want to be able to do is I want to be able to obviously click this button here and click save. And I want to save this specific arrow. So how do we do that? Well, that's with the macro. So let's go ahead and go with that macro now, and we'll write up that macro. So that's here inside our reconcile, and that's the next one we're going to write called reconcile save. And again, we're going to start out focusing on the reconcile. So with reconcile, and we want to make sure that we take care of all of the required fields. So we have some fields that are required. So we want to make sure that we do. So let's take a look in here. Remember, we want to make sure that we have a count, an ending balance, and a statement date. So to make sure that, I want to make sure that B6 is 3. If B6 is 3, then I know that we've got them all required. So if .range B6 does not equal 3, then they're not all filled. Does not equal 3, then we need to let the user know. So we do that with the message box, and we say, please make sure to include, we'll let them know account, ending balance, and statement date. Statement, those are all very important. Statement date before saving. And then exit sub. Nothing we can do unless we actually have that. So we've got that. We want to make sure that. Also, what I want to do is I want to check for an outstanding balance. If, to make sure, M8 does not equal 0, I want to at least let the user know and ask them if they want to go ahead, right? It's not in balance. They can still save it, but at least give them a warning. So what we're going to do is we're going to check for outstanding balance. And we'll put a little note on the above one too. We're going to check for required fields. Check for required fields. So as far as the outstanding balance, we just want to know in that case, if .range M8 .value does not equal 0, then do what? Then let the user know. So we want, it's an option for the user. So if message box, what is that message box? We'll just say your reconcile contains an outstanding balance. Make sure they want to save it. Outstanding balance. Are you sure you want to save? Are you sure you want to save? And we'll give that a yes or no. So we'll end that quote. And then it's going to be VB yes or VB no. And then I'll give it a title. We'll call it, let's see, outstanding balance. That's the title. And then I want to know equals, if it equals VB no, they don't want to continue, then exit sub. Okay, so we're exiting the sub if they don't want to continue. All right. Okay, good. So that's it. It's just a single line of code that we covers that. So we want to make sure that they're doing that. So now that we have that, we want to make sure that what I want to make sure is I want to see what happens if they only put in 1 or 2 fields. I want to check if this is 1 or 2, if this is 1 or 2, meaning only 1 field out of the 3 fields, or if 2 fields out of the 3 fields are filled out, let the user know that they must fill out all of the fields. If none of them, it's fine. They don't need to fill out. If it's 0, if this is 0, it's fine. I only want to know if it's 1 or 2. So that's what we're going to do and check in this one. So I'm simply going to be looking for if B7 equals 1 or 2. So we're going to check for required interest earned or cash back. If B7, we're going to focus B7 dot value equals 1, or what if it equals 2? In that case, what I want to make sure is to let the user know. Or equals 2, then give the user know. Message box. Let's put this when, give it a little bit more dynamic. When adding a, and we don't know what they're adding, right? And whatever's located in E5, right? E5 dot range. E5. What's in E5? Why do we want to put that? Because I want to put whatever. Remember, this is dynamic text, right? It's either going to be interest earned or cash back. So why not put that in there in our message box so that they know exactly what it is? So E5 dot value when adding it, whatever is interest, the dynamic rate, and let's do comma and then space. Please make sure to fill in all fields, and then exit sub. I'm going to do the same exact thing for the other one, except I'm just going to change the references. So I'm going to copy this here. I'm going to place that directly down here, but this time what we're going to change is check for the required, let's say interest or interest. Let's call this service charge or interest paid. Service charge or interest paid, we'll call that. Okay, we'll escape out of there. Service charge, interest paid. Incurred service charge or interest paid. And this, of course, is going to be based on B8. B8 is what we're using here. B8, this is the 3 fields that are focused on there. So located in row 7 for that. So B8. So making that change. If B8 equals 1 or B8 equals 2, then E7, when adding A, whatever's in E7, please make sure to fill in all the fields, exit sub. Okay, we're good to go. I like that. Checking to make sure that the required fields, and we've got the correct. Now what I want to do is I want to check for transaction items to make sure that we have those. So check for minimum items. Okay, the first thing what I want to do is I want to set the last row. So in this case, we're going to set the last recurring row is going to be equal to, and we'll base this on E. So column E is where our data is. So that's going to be our last reconcile row. It should be REC, reconcile row. And that's going to be the last one. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to check if the last reconcile row is less than 11, then let the user know. Then let the user know they need to have a message box. In this case, we'll just simply say, please make sure your reconcile statement contains at least 1 transaction, and then exit the sub. Okay, assuming that it does, then we can then move on. Okay, so now we have it. So now what I want to do is I want to basically turn off calculations, right? Because it's going to be a lot faster if we do that. So application.calculation equals, and I'm going to turn it to manual, and then before the macro ends, we need to turn it back on to automatic. So I'm going to paste that down here, and then make sure we turn that back to automatic before our macro ends. Okay, so inside our macro, then we can do everything else, because it's going to make it a lot faster, because we do need to loop through a lot of rows. Okay, I want to set the account name. The account name is going to be equal to whatever's in F3. So equal.range F3 is our account name. We'll call that account name. I also want to know the last, let's just say the statement date. Actually, statement date is going to be equal to also J3. That is our statement date. We'll put those into variables. J3, and that's our statement date. Okay, once we have that, I want to check to see if it is a new reconcile or an existing. B4 is going to tell us just that right here. Inside that B4, if B4 is blank, we know that it is a brand new one. Otherwise, it is an existing. So let's write that in right now. If dot range B4 dot value equals empty, then it's a new one. Then it's a new, else existing. Existing, okay, we'll do two things if it's existing and a few things if it is new. So we'll put that, it's called a new, call it new reconcile. Okay, so with the new reconcile, what do we want to do? Well, I want to know the database row, reconcile database row. What row are we going to be placing on it? It's going to be that first available row inside our reconcile database. In this case, it's 6. So what I want to do is get the last row and then simply add 1 based on that reconcile database. So it's going to be the recon database dot range, and it's going to be, you'll use a and then 999 dot end xlp dot row plus 1, first available row. So once we have that, I also want to know the reconcile ID. What is that next ID? Well, that next ID is located directly inside B5. We can pull it from here. It's also pretty much here in K2, but I want to pull it the next one based on that max formula we added, located in B5. Okay, so we can do the reconcile equal to dot range B5. It's going to get us that. So that's going to be the reconcile ID. Okay, so once I have that, what I want to do is I want to make sure that we place that ID directly inside the first column. That's only going to be for new. I'm going to place it directly inside here, A and whatever the row is. So reconcile database.range A and the database row dot value is going to be equal what? Recon ID. Set reconcile ID. Okay, so once we have that, we set the ID. That's all we need to do for new. So what about for existing? For existing, I just need two things. I need to know what row. Well, what is that row? That row is located, whatever's in B4. B4 is going to track that. So all I need to do is just copy and paste that in B4. Okay, so that's our reconcile database row. And I also want to know what the ID is. That's going to be located in K2 for the existing. So we're going to copy this. It's going to be equal K2 is where the existing is. So they call this reconcile ID. That's all I need to know for the existing. Everything else is going to come regardless if it is the new reconcile or the existing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this, and we need to fill in some other information. So what do we need? I need B, C, D, and E. Count, beginning balance, ending balance, and statement date. I want to add all that in. So we can do that here. So B, I also need to know C, D, and E. So we just need to simply change these and then paste them in. D and then E here. So what are those things? So let's put a comment before we add in everything else so that we know what they are. Bring this down so we can keep track of each one. We know that this is the account name. We know that the next one is going to be our beginning balance. And we know that the last one is going to be our ending balance, which is in column D. So call this ending balance. And then lastly, we have our statement date. So statement date. So now we can do the rest. So it's going to be equals. We have this one in a variable. So we're going to put the statement date. We've already set the variable above right here. We know the statement date. So we also want to know the beginning balance and the account name. We also have into a variable. So let's put that in there. So account name, we put that into a variable right there. And then if you're not sure if the variable's right, you just lowercase it and change it up. Next up, all we simply need to do is just copy and put the range that those are located in here. So it's going to be, I might as well copy including the equals. It's a little bit quicker for typing. And then we'll just update the ranges accordingly. So all we need is the beginning balance and the ending balance. So the beginning balance is located directly inside M3, and the ending balance is located in H3. So we can just update that. The beginning balance M3 here, and the ending balance is in H3. Good, so we've got that. We're all set up with that. Ending balance, we're good to go. So now what I want to do is we've saved everything for the database, but now what we want to do is we want to save the information changed. I want to know change if it's cleared, and I want to know what row it's on, and I want to save that into my transactions, right? We've got our original transactions here, but I want to know a few things. I want to know whether it's cleared. I want to save that, and I want to know what row it's been placed here, and I want to know the ID associated with that too. So I really want to place those three things into each individual row. So we can do that with just a few lines of code and loop. So we're going to do that now. But before we do that, right, before we add in those, what we need to do is I want to check, we need to add these items. If the user has added in cashback or credit, or if I need to know if we need to add those. We need to add those as individual transaction items at the bottom, right? But I also want to know, have they been saved yet? If they have already been added, I'm going to put a row, a database row here, or database row. So I need to check here. If one, is this showing a 3 or is this showing a 3? If this is a 3, then I know that we need to save this. Do I save it to the existing row? Maybe we've added it before. If this is blank, it's not. It's been saved yet. So we're going to run a few checks. I want to save these as individual transactions. So how do we do that? Well, we can check right here with a few if lines. So here we go. Let's check add. We'll call this interest earned for cash back. And then if any. So if dot range B7 dot value equals 3, then we're going to be adding it in. And then end if. So if it's equal to 3, that means we do have to add it in. But now I need to know, have we added it before? In other words, when we load a transaction, and there already was a cashback associated, this will have a database row. In other words, it's going to have a row probably all the way. It's going to look something like this, right? Notice that this is the row 5 and this is the row 7. This is row 5 and this is row 7. So in previous transactions in our data, we've added it in already. So I need to know that, right? Very important. So we have to know if it contains a value. So when I load that in, so we need to check, has it been previously saved to the database or not? How do we know that? Well, we know it based on whatever's in K5. If dot range K5 dot value equals empty, then we'll just call this new transaction, else existing transaction. So again, if it is new, all we need to do is determine what row it's on. It's going to be the first available row. So the transaction database row is going to be equal to transaction database dot range. And what is that range again? We're going to use A9999 dot end XLAP dot row plus 1, first available transaction row. Okay, so also what I want to know is there's a few things that we're going to add only for new. What are we adding in? Well, the first thing I want to add is the ID, the reoccurring ID here, and I want to add in the row here. So that's going to, so we're going to H, I, and J. Those are all for new transactions, right? So going to add those 3 items right here. Let's do that right now. And also probably we're going to add in the cleared status because we know it's going to be cleared automatically in G because anything that they put in is automatically cleared. So let's add that in right now. So here we go. So we're going to start out with whatever's located in H. So transaction database dot range H, we've already assigned the row, and the transaction database row dot value is going to be equal to, what do I want to put inside H? Let's bring this inside H. I want to put whatever row. What row is this on? Well, this is row 5, right? We're knowing row 5. So I'm just going to put in a 5 directly. Equals 5. Set row. Okay. All right. So that's going to go in H. And then beyond that, what do I want to put in? The ID goes into H and the row goes into I. Okay. We got that covered. All right. So let's just copy that and that's fine. And then we're going to paste that in here. H and inside I, of course, that is going to take on our row here. So that's going to put that. And our ID, which we've already defined inside a variable, equals recurring ID. Call this set ID. Set ID. So the ID goes first, the row goes second. And then what else do we need to do? Well, certainly we need to add in whatever's located. I want to put that row, and that's just a formula, right? I want to know the row, so we're going to add in that automatically. Copy that. And here, it's going to simply be a formula. So what is that formula? Equals, in the parentheses, equals, and then row. So that's all we need to do. Just add in that formula right there. So once I've got that, that's going to set our row, called the set row formula, so that it's always dynamic. That's why if we delete any rows, it's always going to be there. We don't need anything. And then also we can put in our cleared status, but our cleared is going to go in regardless if it is new or if it is existing, so that's fine. So cleared is going to be regardless. So this is only if it's new. So if it's an existing, I want to set the row. What is that row? Is going to be located in K5. Transaction equals whatever's in K5. If it's an existing, equals K5. Okay, so now all we need to do is add in all the other information for this. So what type of information in? I want to add in the date, the account, the description here, and the amount. So let's do that right now. So while we're focused on the transaction database, so it's going to be here, transaction database dot range. A, we're going to put that first thing, A, what's going in A? Well, that's going to be the transaction date. And what is the row number? Of course, we've already set up a transaction database row dot value. Where is that date coming from? That date is going to come directly from whatever's located in J5. So J5 is where we're going to put that. So let's place that date right there. Okay, inside the code equals dot range J5 equals, let's call this the transaction date. That's not the reconciliation date, that's the transaction date. We have to fill in some other fields, so we can do that right now. Of course, we need to put in whatever's in B here, C, D. Let's go ahead and go back into the database here. Sure, we need the account, we need the description. D, we're not going to put in a reference, and then E or F in that case. Okay, so B, of course, we're going to take on, in this case, the account. I need to know what is the account. So how do we do that? That is simply the account name equals, we've already given that a variable, account name. That is the account name, pretty self-explanatory there. So what else? Inside C, column C is going to take on that description. That description is located directly inside F5 equals range F5. So we put that description in there. So now that we have the description, and also what about in the next column? Well, basically what we need to do is I need to determine if it is. So basically we want to add in the debit amount, right? So the debit amount is going to be in column E, right? There's no reference or nothing in D. So E is going to take on that debit amount. And where's that debit amount located? It is located in H5 equals, not range, and we can just copy this here and just change the range here and then make this F5. So that's the debit amount. Okay, we'll call this debit amount. So now that we have the debit amount in column E, we also want to make sure it's cleared, right? Cleared is located in G. So I'm just going to copy this and then update it to G. So this is going to be G. And what is our debit? Our cleared icon, of course, that's going to be simply our character 254. Character 254. That is our cleared icon, if you want to call it an icon. So that's it. That's the, just call it checked box. We'll call this checked box. Good to go. So that's all we need to do. So now all we need to do is pretty much just copy this and do pretty much the same thing, but change the range for the next one, right? So all I'm going to do is do this. Add, in this case, I'm going to copy this here, everything we've done. I'm going to paste it down here. But now this case, we're going to not focus on, we're going to focus on B8. And this time it's not interest earned. What are we focused on here? They're focused on this one right here, the fees or interest paid. So it's going to be the service charge or fees or interest paid. So add service charge or fees or interest paid. Interest or interest paid. And of course, we're focused on B8, right? It is now B8 that's going to take, if B8 equals 3, then we know that there's actually needs to be in. So we just need to update the ranges in this case. In this case, it's not K5, it is K7. And the transaction database is going to be the transaction. H is going to take on, right? This, the set row, we're going to take that on a 7, right? Transaction database row, in this case, is going to be 7. In this case, it's going to be J7. In this case, it's going to be F7. Much easier once we keep some uniformity, and this is going to be H7. So that's it. That's all we had to do for those. Okay, so we've covered both the service charges, interest paid, and we've covered the cashback in case there's any. So now what we need to do is just simply add in the items. And so we can write some text right here. So let's call this update cleared or uncleared items. Let's cleared or uncleared items. So we can set a loop, right? We know it's going to start at 11 for the reconciliation row. Okay, so then of course we need to close our loop, make sure we got that correctly, and then we're just going to call it next recon row. So we've got that there. So now all we need to do is simply loop through those and then add items accordingly. Okay, so let's take a look at that. If, first of all, what I want to know is, has it been previously saved, right? K is going to keep us out. I want to make sure that we have a row there. So does K, if it doesn't contain a row, then we can go to the next item, right? I want to make sure that it contains that row. So if dot range K and reconciliation row dot value equals empty, then go to next item. Okay, so we're going to go down here and then I'm just going to write a next item with a colon. Okay, so that way it's going to skip everything else. If there's no database row, then there's nothing we can do. So now what I want to do is assign that database row. Transaction database row is going to be equal to whatever's in K and the reconciliation row. So this is the transaction database row. Very good. Okay, so now that we have that, what I want to do is just make the cleared status update. So how do we do that? Transaction database, in this case, dot range, H, that's located in H, right? This is what we want to update. All I want to do is update what's located right in H. I want to do the ID, right? And I want to do the cleared. So the cleared status is in G, while the reconcile ID is in H. And I also want to make sure that we're updating I and make sure that J contains a value as well. So that just to double check to make sure everything contains. So the first thing what we want to do is update, let's go with G. So G is going to be the first one. It's going to be that status, that cleared or uncleared. So G and transaction database row dot value is going to be equal to whatever's located in D, dot range D and reconciliation row right there. So that is the cleared or uncleared status, cleared or uncleared. And next up, all we need to do is just copy a little bit of this, and then we're going to just make the updates accordingly. So G, and then we have H is next, and then I is next after that. So what will go in H? Well, in H, I'm going to make sure that we add the reconcile ID. We already have that inside a variable here, so we can just put in the rec ID, reconcile ID. And inside I, we are going to put in the reconciliation row. I is going to take on the reconciliation row. And lastly, what I want to do is I'll put in J. J is going to take on that formula that we put in there. Simply that formula that's going to say the row, just to make sure that we have that equals. And in this case, quotation equals and then row. Very good. I like that. That's going to take on the formula. Next item, in case there's no item, going to go down. That's going to loop through all of them. We're going to restart calculations. We want that. I would like a message box too, letting the user know that it's been saved. So after this, what we can do is we can do message box, and we can just do something like reconciliation saved, alerting the user to know that it's been saved. And then what I want to do is I want to run a macro basically that clears it out and runs new. So reconcile new. Right, we have that macro ready. That was the first one that we did, so that's going to clear all the items right up here. I just want to run this macro that clears everything else out. I like that. Now let's go ahead and save our work. We'll go ahead and assign this particular macro to the button that we created on the save, which is here. And then click assign the macro, and then this is good. Okay, good, I like that. Now all we need to do is just check for any issues that we might have, fix those if they come up, and then we will go ahead. All right, let's go ahead, reconciliation saved. All right, taking a look at the data inside here. Let's take a look at data. Visa, okay, we didn't have beginning balance. This looks right. Transactions, this one, we need to get these. We want to make sure that the row goes over to J and not I. Okay, let's just make that update. That should be J, right? We want to make sure that each one contains J. Double check on that. And so we'll go up here, right? We want to make sure that it is J, right? Let's fix that, J for both of them, right? And then all the way up here, J, right? We want to make sure that those are J. So this, right, would be 5 and 7. This would be here, and then this would be here, right? We just fixed that. Okay, good. So that's what we like. All right, so we've got the rows in I, right, 5 and 7, and in J, we have the actual row of that. So together, J is going to take on that formula here, and J is going to take on the formula right here, and then I is going to take on the 5 or the 7. So we fixed that little issue. Everything else looks good. It's been cleared out. Now what I want to do is notice they've all been assigned that particular item. So we have that in there. Now all we need to do is just load in. So look for, it's contained that 4, like you've got that reconcile ID here. So what I want to do now is I want to be able to put in the 4 here, and then I want to have to be able to load in what we just saved. Okay, so let's write a macro to do that now. That would be the reconcile load. So that's the next one we're going to do. So it's called the load save. It's been previously saved. We're going to now load it in. So let's get that a good start. All right, so we're going to focus again on with reconcile, and we want to make sure. So if B4 equals empty, right? If I put the 4 in here, we know it's going to contain a row. Whatever the user has searched for inside the change event, when they make a change here, if they've put in, I need to add that if they've put in an ID here, put it directly inside here, inside K2. What that's going to do is generate a row here. If that row is blank, in other words, if they enter something incorrect, B4 is going to be blank. So all we need to do is check to see if B4 contains a row. So that's the first thing we want to do. If .range B4.value equals empty, then let the user know, message box, please enter a correct reconciliation ID. Exit sub. Nothing we can do there unless they enter the correct one. Assuming that they have, once they have, we can assign that a row. So the first thing what I want to do is I want to set that load true. We're going to be loading in all the information here. So B2 is going to go to true. Once we finish, it'll go to false. .range B2.value equals true. Set load to true. And then of course what we want to do is make sure it goes to false at a certain point. So I'm going to copy this down here. And then I'm going to paste it down here, and then we're going to go to false and change this to false. Let's call this set load to false, and then just change this value to false. Okay, and everything else is going to go in between there. So once we have that, we can then continue on. What I want to do now is I want to make sure we get that database row, what's located in B4. And that's going to be simply be called the recurring database row is going to equal whatever's in B4. That's our database or database row. Okay. Once we have that row, we then can move on. So we want to then clear out anything that might be. If there's an existing one, we need to clear all that out. So we can clear existing. I'm just going to copy and paste it as we did before, but so I'm going to paste it right down here. So basically, this entire range, we're just going to clear the existing fields. Okay, we want to do that. All right. So once we have that, I then want to load in all the information, right? Inside F3, I want to put in the account. Inside H3, the ending balance, the statement date, the beginning balance. I want to put all that inside here. So .range F3, that's going to take on, of course, our account. And where's that going to come from? It's going to come from recon database .range. It's going to come from column B there. And we've already defined the recon database row there, .value. So that, of course, is our account name. And then we just need to make some updates according to the other. So in F3, of course, we didn't use data mapping in this case, but that's okay. It's just a few values, not too many. So H3 is going to, we have M3 is going to take on our beginning balance. So we'll put that beginning balance, and that's going to come directly from column C inside there. Inside column D is going to take on our ending balance. And where's our ending balance going to go to? Ending balance is going to go directly inside right here, located in H3. So it's going to come into H3. Okay, so once we have our ending balance, what I also want to have is coming from column E, that is going to be our statement date. So we'll put in statement date here, and our statement date is going to go inside J3. So that's going to load up all the main stuff. So that's pretty much it with that. So that's all we need to do as far as the top section, the main section. So we're good to go on that. We've loaded in. Remember, those triggers, the reason we set this to true and back to false, those triggers are account name and statement date, F3 and J3. So we set B2 to true and set it back to false because of the triggers on F3 and J3. Those are the triggers here that we don't want running. These triggers right here on the change, F3 and J3. Those are the triggers we're avoiding. So we set it to true because we want to make sure this isn't going to happen. This isn't going to run it's only going to run to happen when B2 is false. If B2 is true, this is not going to write. We don't want to load a new one. We don't want to run that so that's why we set B2 to true and then back to false. So continuing on. Now we're going to focus on the transaction database. We've now loaded the account name, the ending balance, the statement date, and the beginning balance. We've loaded those 4 fields in. This should be an if error, in case there's a value. So if error, right? We don't want to see that if there's anything, comma, and then the space here. Okay, so that's it. That's what I want. Saving our work so far, and then we can continue on. And now what we want to do is we want to focus on that transaction database. So with transaction database, and what are we going to be doing with that? Well, we're going to be running an advanced filter. So the first thing we want to do is get the last transaction row. So the last, in fact, we've already written it up here, so we just need to just select it up here because we already determined it up here, right here. So the last transaction here, the first available row. So we want the last transaction database row is going to be right here. So that last transaction database row, we can put it down here. Last transaction row, it's going to be equal to whatever's in the transaction database. We already have the transaction database there. Hey, so that's our last row. So once we have the last row, and why do we want the last row? Well, I'm going to run that advanced filter. going to run and get that last row. We need to run an advanced filter, but this time what I want to do is I want to run the criteria a little bit different. This is going to be based all on the reconciliation ID. If we look at this is our criteria, this is based on K2. So that means as soon as our macro puts whatever they put in, we haven't done that part yet, puts it here in K2, whatever's inside K2, that is going to be our criteria. So once we know the criteria, we can then have our results come back into here. So we know that. But to do that, we need to get the last row. If the last transaction row is less than 3, then exit sub. Okay, nothing we can do there. Okay, so now what we want to do is run that advanced filter, because we're going to, just as I mentioned before, and we're going to also do it again, just like we did last time, right? So we're going to run it based on, this time, of course, our criteria is going to be slightly different, but it's going to be based on A2 all the way through K, using that blank column the last. So that's what we have to do here. A2 through K, our criteria is going to be O2 through O3. So we're going to change that to O2 through O3. We want to copy it to the range, the same as before. We're going to use that same one. Copy it to that range. We could have copied and pasted that advanced filter, but it's okay. Q through Y, having that come through. Q here, Q2 through Y. And then, of course, we want the last results row. Assuming that we have the last results row, and we could say last result row equals, basically, this is going to be based on that date, which is going to look like an R. Now, if the last results are less than 3, then, of course, exit the sub. Assuming that we have data, and we can then continue on. We know that we can continue. Okay, so now what we want, this is the last time we're going to exit out of the sub before moving through. So to make things faster, again, we're going to use application calculation. Application.calculation equals manual, and then of course we're going to change it directly to automatic before we end. So we're going to change that here, equals calculation automatic. Okay, because inside here we're going to run our loop, and we want to make sure things are fast, and we can do that when calculation is set to manual. So once we have that, we're going to run our results for our loop. Result row, we know it starts on 3, equals 3 to last result row, and then close our loop, next result row. So inside that is where we want all the action to happen. Okay, so first thing what I want to do is I will need to know, right, there's a little bit difference. If the recurring row, which is located in Y, we're going to set that up. I want to know if it is located 5 or 7. That's very important because I want to set it up. So let's go ahead and write that in. Check for, right? I want to know, are we adding, is one of the transactions check for service, charge, or interest transaction? What do we mean by that? What I want to know is one of these transactions that we entered, is it possible that it's one of these or one of these? And how would we know that? Well, I would know that based on the row, right? The reconcile row, and that's all the way down here, right? So we know based on this, is it 5 or is it 7? If what is that, whatever's in I, and there, if it's 5 or 7, then we know to place it directly inside here, here, and here. Otherwise, we can bring it down here. So we need to differentiate between those two types of transactions. So we can do that with just a little bit of code. So first thing what we want to do is define the value there. So the reconciliation row is equal to Y and the result row. Y, column Y, remember it's coming directly from our results here inside Y. Which is, let's go all the way up so we have some data to look at. So it's going to be here once it comes up, okay? But we didn't have any because we didn't run it, which is the row. But this time we're going to run it all the way to Y. Our results are coming directly from Y, so I want it in there. So that's what we're going to look at. So Y and the result row, and the result row. This is our reconciliation row, row. Now what I want to do is I want to check, is it 5 or is it 7? If recon row is equal to 5 or recon row is equal to 7, then do something else, Let's just call it service or interest, just to save a little speed there. Okay, so then we know it's one of those. So if there, then what we need to do is add that information in. So reconcile with the sheet, reconcile.range, F and the reconcile row, dot value, what's going to be an F? F is going to be coming, I want that description. That description is going to go directly in F. It's going to go either in 5 or 7 based on the row. So I want that there. So F is equal to, it's going to come from the description. Where is it? Dot range. Where's that description located? That description is located directly in column S. So that's what we're going to do. S and the result row. All right, so we've got that, and that is, of course, our description. What else do we know? Of course, we need to add in the amount and we need to add in the date. So where's that? But first of all, what I want to know based on that, I want to know, are we adding in a debit amount or are we adding in a credit amount? So that's very, very important. So we can determine that with an if-then statement. So it's called this add amount, credit or debit, credit or debit. Okay, so if dot range v, we're looking at v in the result row dot value, because it's going to be one or the other, it does not equal empty. Then what I want to do is update that reconcile. In this case, reconcile. You need to call out that sheet. Range, in this case, h and the recon row dot value is going to equal whatever's located in W. It's going to be a credit, right? If it's V does not equal empty, then we're going to put in V, of course. Then we're going to put in, if it's not empty, we're putting in here the debit amount right there. Okay, that works. Else, we're going to put in the credit amount. Else, putting in the credit amount. This, there we go. We just copy this, but instead, of course, column V, we're going to put in column W. So like this, and putting it in column W. So it's either going to be, and I'll notate that, W. So this is going to be the debit or this is going to be the credit. So I want to make sure to put in the one that contains the value. Okay, so here we have V contains our debit amount or our credit amount located there, because only one's going to contain a value. Okay, so just like that. All right, next up, what we want to do is in J, right? J is going to take on our date. So all we need to do is just pretty much copy this here and then update that. And so it's going to be J, right? Our date, J is coming from, our date is located directly in column R. So that is our transaction date here. Let's take a quick look at that so we can see J, column J, whatever row, 5 or 7, is going to take on it. It's going to come directly from our column R. Okay, so we got that covered there. That's the transaction date. That is it. That's all we have to do, but we do want to update that database row. I want to make sure that row, whatever row, is going to be placed directly inside K. Remember, that's very, very important. So K is going to take on that as well. So we're going to paste that in. Inside K, we're going to put in directly what is located from our column X. X is going to take on that right here. And that is our database row, right? Because when we make that update, we need to make sure that it's updated. And I want to make sure that K also gets cleared out. K5 and K7 also get cleared out too. Perfect. That's very exactly what I want. All of this is for service or interest. But what about if it's another one? What about if it's just a standard? Let's put in the standard transaction. In that case, we just have a little bit to do. In that case, all I really want to do is just bring over all the data, right? So I just take this Q all the way over here to the R and then just bring it on over. So that's all I need to do through X, Q through X. I'm going to bring it all the way from D through all the way through K. So D through K is equal to Q through X. So we can write that in right now in a single line of code. So we'll go reconcile dot range D, starting always column D, and the reconcile row, and through all the way through K and the reconcile row, dot value is equal to dot range, starting with Q and the result row, and colon all the way through X and the result row, dot value. So that's going to bring over all the transaction, including the row, bring over all transaction data. Okay, so that's going to bring over in that single line of code. So that's it. So all we need to do, that's end if, right? So that's the only thing for the standard transaction. And we're just going to loop through the results. Okay, just like that. And then, of course, application calculation back to automatic, saving our work. And when do we want to trigger this? Well, I want to trigger this when the user makes a change to what? When the user enters a search, right? When they make a change to M2, that is exactly when I want to take this, whatever they've put in, assuming it's not blank, and put it directly inside K2. So that's a change event. Back into the reconcile, we're going to focus on the worksheet change, but this change is going to be directly based on that cell M2. So we're going to change this to M2. We also want to make sure that M2 is not blank. And range M2 dot value does not equal empty. Then do what? Then do a few things. Okay, so the first thing is, what I want to do is I want to take whatever they've entered and I want to place it directly in K2. So range K2 dot value equals range M2 dot value. Then I want to run the macro that's going to save that. All right, and that's it. That's all we need to do for that. Very, very simple. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to save our work, always save before, and then I'm just going to double click this or enter 4 again, and then we'll check it. Okay, last row is not defined. Okay, so that should be the last transaction row, right? From our advanced filter, we know that. Continue on, and then let's take a look. All righty, let's take a look. We'll fix that. That's just going to be, what I'm going to do is I'm going to round this. The reason why this is, and let's take a look at this. I'm going to show you something here. Why is this at 0? Why is it showing? It's not really 0. It's kind of strange. Equals, okay, so I'll just put that in another formula here. Equals, now it looks like 0, but if we bring out, we can see that it's actually not 0. It's, you know, we need to round it up. So let's bring this down here. And then I'm going to increase the decimals a lot, and then we'll take a look. All right, what we can do is we want to round this up, make sure there's just 2 digits. So I'm going to do that, just round it to the 2 digits. So round, making sure that it's not more than that, because that's going to ensure that it is 0. So 2 like that. And now that goes green. Okay, so basically it's like a very, very minute, you know, sense. So that's what we handle that. Just handle that with a round. Okay, great. So let's take a look. We've got 0. Everything is saved. If we were to have a beginning balance, then of course it wouldn't balance, but it would. All we would need to do is just change it to 13,257.19, and it would balance. Okay, that's looking really good. All right, cool. So we've got everything's looking good. I don't necessarily like these buttons here. Let's move it over, and then we'll just bring it to the center of this a little bit. I like that better. And I'm going to do the same thing with this one, new. So I click the macro. That's working very well. And then new, and then bring it over a little space. Okay, that looks very nice. Okay, so now what we want to do is we just want to make sure that these navigations, we know how to load it up. Everything looks good. Let's double check everything. We've got notice we've got our database rows here, right? We've got this. What I'd like to do is when we click new and we click an account in here, let's just put in 915, right? And so it loads. What I'd like to do is run this macro based on this. So I want to assign a macro to this, the one that we've already, so it's going to be called the load new. Click OK. So basically what I want to do is refresh this based on this list. So that means statement date. So that if we do 9/1, right, let's do this a date, and we hide it, it's going to change those transactions. So I don't want to see anything after that. Notice it should only be shown down. What we need to do is we need to clear out all this data. I want to make sure it gets cleared out on that. So we notice if we take a look at our transactions, we see that just one line, which is what we want, but we need to clear out the data on load new. So that's very important. So at least I just want to clear out basically what I want to clear out, just the data here. That's all I really want to clear out on load new. So we're going to do it directly with the reconcile. So .range, we'll already copy that here. And then all I need to do is just clear out this contents right here, D11 through K99. Clearing that out, when we're loading in, we need to make sure we do that, saving our work. And now what we can do is, now I like that. Now that's exactly the way. So we're hiding the transactions only on before that. So that's what I want to see. Perfect. So we only want it to go up and down. So for example, if we say 915, we only want those transactions. So again, changing this to September 15th, we'll also do that. So it should show everything, including after, which we want. But when we select this, we want it to automatically update, showing only dates up until 9/15. Perfect. That's exactly what we want. Okay, so last thing we have to do is just get these navigation, and then we're going to be done. On the delete, right, I'm going to add this one for our Patreon, right? So if you want to learn how to do the delete, try it on yourself. Let me know. I'm going to be creating this solution directly for our Patreon. Inside that, you join us. It's starting at just $3 a month, 10 or 20. What I do is I create brand new, amazing features or fixes or anything else you might want to see on these existing. I'll do a new recording. I'll add an updated workbook. So would love to see you join. It's a great way to support these free trainings as well. Okay, so let's go. So that'll be for delete. I'll hold off on that, but I do want to create these navigations. I want to be able, if I'm on Reconcile 5 and I click previous, I want to go to 4, 3, 2, and 1, and so on and so forth. So let's get that done before I let you go. And we're just going to call that the navigation. So those are the last two macros that we need to go over today. And that is right here, previous and next. So what are we going to do? So as far as the previous, so let's go there with Reconcile. That's the sheet we're going to be focusing on. And then what do we want to do? Well, that basically what I want to do is I want to be able to determine what is the current row? Do we have a current row? Have we selected it, right? For example, here, there's not really, I want to know, is there a current row selected? What do I mean by that recons row? If I know, let's say we're on 3, if I know it's 5, then the previous would be 2, the next would be 4, but I need to know what row we're on, if there's any row. Maybe there's not. So first thing I want to check, what's located in B4? Is there a row? So if dot range B4 dot value equals empty, then do something. And if. So what are we going to do? Well, in this case, we're going to call this no current reconcile. So when they do previous, what do I want to happen? If there's nothing, I want to go to the last one, right? If we're on 5, I want to go to 4. Basically, if there's no current one, I just want to go here. All right, so that's all we're going to do. Find the last row and go to whatever the last one, assuming that there is data. And there's data. So to do that, we could do the last recurring row. It's equal to recon database dot range, and it's going to be A99999 dot end xlf dot row. Okay, so that's the last row. So let's take a look. If the last recon row is less than 3, that means there's no data at all. Less than 3, then we need to let the user know. Message box, there are no previous, just put something like there are no previous reconciles. Previous reconciles. Okay, exit sub, nothing we can do. Assuming that there is, then all I need to do is take whatever's in there and put it directly in there. So assuming that there is data, dot range, M2 is all we need to remember. M2, if we make a change in it, it's going to automatically trigger that. All I need to do is M2 value, in fact, K2, all I need to do is trigger whatever's in M2 because that's just like the search. Any change there is going to put that value in K2. So M2 is going to be equal to what? You can probably figure it out. M2 is going to simply be the last row and whatever's located in column A here. So M2 dot value is equal to recon database dot range A and simply the last recon row dot value. Comes with the last recon ID. That's all we're doing is placing the last one in there. So now that we know the last saved one there, else, what else? But what if, in this case, let's take a look at this. Else, what if B4 is not empty? In that case, what we want to do is determine the next one. Else, how are we going to do that? Well, we can do that simply with the current row. So else if, what if it's 3, dot range B4 equals 3. What's that going to mean? If it's 3 and they're trying to go previous, there's nothing beyond that. So we need to let them know that they're on the first one. They can't go anything before that. Then do something. Message box, you are on the first reconcile. Exit sub. I'll fix that spelling here. Exit sub. Okay, so nothing they can do if they're on the first one. No, all right, just let the user know. Assuming that they're not on the first one, dot range M2 dot value is equal to recon database dot range A. We're always focused on column A, and whatever's in B4, we could probably just put this into a variable, probably a little bit easier, but that's okay. A for dot value minus 1 dot value. And what does that mean? Basically, whatever the value of is in here, let's say it's row 5, I want to go to row 4. So 5 minus 1 is 4. So whatever's in A4, we're going to take on that. That's the previous ID, previous. And that's it. That's it. That's all we need to do. That should be sufficient enough. So let's save our work, check before we do it. And then what we're going to do is we're going to copy this and just add this to that button, the previous button. And then all we need to do is the next button here. So this is the button that we're focused on, right? We're on the last one. Right click here again, inside there, assign the macro, paste that in there, click OK. Now put it in here, 4, 3, 2, 1. Perfect. Okay, now all we need to do is the next one. So we can do that, but now all I need to do is just simply copy and paste and make a few changes. So I'm going to copy this here. I'm going to paste it down here. But this one's a little bit different, right? So let's go ahead and put the last recurring. I want to know the last row. Let's put that up first, right? Last recurring row. Now, if B4 is empty, which we need to know if there's B4, then what I want to do is I want to know the first one. Well, we know the first one in case there are, but basically, if there's nothing there, we're not on a current one, I want to show the first one, whatever's located in A3. But I need to make sure that A3 contains a value. If there's no data in this table, there's nothing we can do. To do that, we just need to check the last row. If the last is less than 3, we can just put in this one, There's no current one. So there are no previous reconciles or no current, let's say no current reconcile. I think that's better. No current, right? So this one, there are no, if it's less than 3, there is, I'm going to put is no reconcile data. Reconcile, not even a first row, in other words, data. Okay, exit sub. Okay, assuming that there is, then we can do the reconcile, right? We're already on there. M2 is going to be equal to A3, right? We know it's to be the first one, so we can get rid of it, right? A3, the first, we're going to put this, not the first. In this case, we want the first, not the last. First, we're going to. Else, what is this? Let's fix this up. Add the parentheses there. Okay, else, what's this? That means there is a currently selected reconcile. Okay, this case, if B4 equals, I want to know if they're on the last row, the last recurring row, the last reconcile row. In that case, if they're on the last one, you're on the last one. Let them know, the last, right? They can't keep moving forward. They're going to go 1, 2, 3. If they're on the last one, they can't keep going down. There's nothing there, right? So we need to know if they're on the last one. And if they are, we need to let the user know. Assuming that they're not on the last one, M2 is going to be equal to A, whatever's in B4, in this case, +1. And it's going to be the next ID, not the previous. Next. Good, so that's it. Saving our work, as always, before running the macro. Copying this here. We could also select it from the list. That would not be a problem. Going back in here, right-clicking here, and then signing this. Sign that macro, pasting that in here, clicking OK. So we're on 1. We know we're on 1. We want to go to 2 next. Let's end the property. We only need 1 of those end subs, not 2. Continuing on, OK. That's going to go to 2. Then 3, then 4, and then the last one, you're on the last reconcile. Did I spell that right? Probably not. You are on the last reconcile. I spelled it right for a change. Okay, that looks pretty good. I have shown you how you can reconcile any type of account, whether it is a bank account or a credit card account. We can add in other transactions, additional ones like cash back and credit and interest paid and interest earned. And we can also run filters and automatically use conditional formatting both in the table and both things. And that's going to be it. If you do like these trainings, a great way to help us is to pick up my 200 workbook zip file. It's just $77. That's less than 40 cents per workbook template. And it's a great foundation. You can create any type of application you want. It also comes with an incredible workbook library. It's going to give you a single click to you can open the workbook or single click to go to the training video. Thank you so much. I really appreciate the time you put into learning. It will help you incredibly in your future. And I'm glad you've chosen to spend the time with me in these trainings. Thank you so much. We'll see you next week for a brand new training.